wanted to introduce myself. My name is Mackenzie Houston, and I am going to be talking about minority youth and crime. This is for Criminal Justice 306. I first wanted to just start off talking about issues that are facing minority youth today. Minority youth in the criminal justice system, whether they're the victim or the offender, are disproportionately represented. The overrepresentations are likely attributed to the amount of minority youth living in poverty, neighborhoods with gang and drug alcohol activity, and family structures. In other words, they're single parent homes that they live without supervision, or they live in volatile homes. Some important statistics for juveniles in the United States. First off, 22% of the juvenile population were living below the poverty threshold in 2010. The percentage of the juvenile population living below the poverty level was 39% for African Americans, 35% for Hispanics and American Indians, and 14% for Asians, and 12% for whites. The proportion of children living in a single-parent household increased from 9% from 1960 to 27% in 2010. The rates were highest for African American youth, which contributed to 54% of that statistic. Data from 2010 showed that 1 in 10 homicide victims were under the age of 18. African American juveniles, male and female, have an increased chance of being homicide victims compared to white males and female juveniles. African American and Hispanic juveniles are more likely to be victims of violent crime than white juveniles. Additionally, a report focusing on serious violence in 2010 showed that the rate for African American youth was twice the rates for whites and Hispanics. The 2010 simple assault rates for African American youth also were higher than that for whites or Hispanic youth. Key statistics continued for juveniles in the United States. In 2014, African Americans, who comprised 15% of the juvenile population, made up 52.4% of all arrests of youth for violent index crimes, which include homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. Among young offenders arrested for homicide and robbery, African Americans constituted 57% and 71% respectively of all arrestees. Low-income youth are more likely to be involved in police contact than middle and upper-class youth due to the fact that they are visible on the streets more often. They're less likely to have a home infrastructure, which include backyards, larger living spaces, etc., in which to go and hang out. Police pay closer attention to juveniles, mostly in part because criminal activity is at its height for individuals between the ages of 14 and 24 years of age. African American youth aged 10 to 17 and consisting of 16% of the total juvenile population make up 35% of the youth involved in court proceedings. Some causation, which I had discussed earlier when we first opened the presentation, single parent homes and poor communication between parent and child, drugs and alcohol, gang violence, and poverty are all contributing factors that increase the risk of victimization and also contribute to offender behavior. African American and Hispanic juveniles are more likely to come from single-parent homes than whites and Asians. Hispanic youth are at a higher risk for gang involvement, mostly due to the fact that their neighborhoods, or the neighborhoods in which they live, are populated with gang activity. The disproportionate victimization and offender rates for minority youth can be attributed to disadvantaged communities that juveniles are being raised in. The lack of opportunity, proper education, and supervision put juveniles at risk at an early age. Inner City Vision's youth program is the program I want to talk about today that is doing their part in Los Angeles County to contribute to minimizing gang activity, drug and alcohol related juvenile offenses, violent offenses. They're addressing the issues that plague inner city youth. They are a nonprofit organization, and they're in partnership with A Better LA. Inner City Visions, they aim to reduce gang violence, which I discussed, and they are focused in LA County. Their mission is to strategically break the intergenerational cycles of poverty, addiction, and gang violence by using a holistic approach that meets the unique needs of vulnerable families and children. They are, as I mentioned, a nonprofit organization, a 501c3. They receive their funding from private donors and from activities that generate income, which is then filtered back into the programs. In an effort to arm the youth with the tools they need to be successful in life, Inner City Visions offers a multitude of programs that I'll discuss with you. They also work to keep juveniles off the street and aim to prevent child exploitation. Child exploitation is actually a large portion of what they are involved in. Some of the programs that they provide include alternative high school, mentoring, advocacy, job readiness, employment opportunities, tattoo removal, empowerment workshops, leadership academies, and medical services. Additionally, to reduce crime and street violence that stems from gang-related activity and to target high-risk juveniles that are at high risk for gang-related violence, Inner City Visions has created programs to educate, deter, and communicate. Some of the services that they provide include violence interruption, conflict mediation, community crisis intervention, rumor control, family advocacy for victims of violent crimes, racial tolerance, mentoring, cultural enrichment field trips, safe passage, coordinated crisis response, park programs, and anti-bullying programs. I want to talk about reform and what some of the options are, or some of the programs that are already working at reform for inner city youth, for juveniles that are high risk. There are a multitude of reform options that target and promote change with juveniles living in the inner city, in gang and poverty prevalent communities. The challenge, however, is understanding what possible solutions can make the greatest difference. Evidence has shown that community outreach programs and other youth-targeted organizations are not necessarily the most effective to ensure a long-term change. Likely, the cycle of sustained poverty in neighborhoods needs to be minimized or end in order to make a significant difference in changing the disproportionate amount of minorities that become victims or offenders. According to Zimmerman, Welsh, and Posick, while the relationship between neighborhood crime rates and neighborhood organizations is well grounded in theoretical work, empirical work has been mixed, with some studies concluding that organizations may be unrelated to or even contribute to neighborhood crime overall. To date, the existence of a relationship between neighborhood youth organizations and crime, as well as the direction of the relationship, continues to be in question. With that being said, however, there is no denying that reform is needed. Findings from the Sentencing Project in 2012 found that after surveying individuals that had been sentenced to life in prison when they were juveniles, 79% had witnessed violence in their homes on a regular basis. 32% grew up in public housing. 40% had been enrolled in special education classes. Fewer than half were attending school at the time of their offense. 47% were physically abused. 80% of girls reported histories of physical abuse, and 77% of girls reported histories of sexual abuse. Programs and organizations that have been seeing some success in changing lives of youth in disadvantaged communities do include community outreach programs, like we talked about before with Inner City Visions, working with communities and the members to improve the future of the youth living in those communities. After school programs, keeping kids off the streets, continued education processes after school, doing homework, that sort of thing. Physical and mental distractions from stress in home life. Mentoring community members that have life experiences that they can share with inner city youth, and community members that are able to offer leadership and guidance for inner city youth. I'm going to conclude with some references to wrap this up. And I want to just thank you for your time, and appreciate it. Thank you.